Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. During our recent Shravan Kirtan camp in Lika, I was asked to give a Brahmacari class, so here we are. We have 2 official Brahmacharis present. It means every devotee is supposed to be a Brahmachari. And others, including 2 women, don't faint, who are present. You can see them out of the corner of my eye. Also during the Shravan Kirtan camp, during the questions and answers sessions, there were 2 questions which I deferred answering until this session. So here we go. One about smartphones. Many brahmacharis use various social medias for so-called preaching or no preaching at all. Many brahmacharis. I didn't even know there were many brahmacharis in Croatia. I guess if you have about 4 or 5, then 2 or 3 is quite a lot. Many brahmacharis use various social medias for so-called preaching. That's quite a statement, so-called preaching or no preaching at all. In some cases, such social platforms contain heavy avenues of Maya, leading those without discrimination to fall down. Should brahmacharis have personal smartphones? Should they be allowed social media outlets within a brahmachari environment? Yeah, it's true. The smartphones give us access to the whole world of Maya. Of course, if we're trying to preach Krishna consciousness, we're also interested in engaging with the whole world of Maya, but it is a double-edged sword which can cut us. We're supposed to cut through Maya, but we can also be cut down by Maya. In 2 of the Brahmachari ashrams in India, where they have many brahmacharis and the training is reputed to be good, I'm told, I know for sure at least one of them, that the brahmacharis are allowed to keep not smartphones, just phones. I don't know if they're even available they're still available, huh? Where you can call, you can phone others and take calls, but you don't have access to the whole panorama of the internet. So that your grandmother has one. She's the last species of human in Croatia who doesn't have a smartphone. Is that right? So there's a possible solution. Because it's considered that to have a phone is practically a necessity in the modern world. It's just expected that everyone has a phone. But if you don't have a smartphone, you can't pay bills in many cases, is it? Or it's convenient for doing all kinds of things, like paying bills. It's a very common thing. Our book distributors, they all have to have that facility by which you can take payments from people's phones. So it does get more complicated as we are sucked more and more into this technological society. But there's one solution to protect the devotees, because Maya is very strong, and just to look up anything on the internet, I don't have a smartphone, but on the laptop to look up anything on the internet, and it's often accompanied by pictures of pretty women which pop up, and which is not healthy for even to live a moral life, what to speak of be a brahmachari. So yeah, caution should be taken. Those who are preaching via the smartphone, it says the person making the inquiry says something for preaching, so-called preaching, or no preaching at all. Well, brahmacharis need to be monitored more than just allowed to just do preaching programs on their own volition. Brahmachari life is supposed to be a disciplined life. Anyway, I think the point is pretty clear. It is dangerous, and there should be some kind of control on that, especially if the devotee is an inexperienced, new or weak devotee. Another question: what is misogyny? In Brahmacari classes, there is this systematic and methodic cherry-picking of the worst shlokas describing female nature. But it is said that this is not misogyny. What then is misogyny? Well, I wonder who goes to Brahmacari classes where there is systematic and methodic cherry-picking of the worst shlokas describing female nature. Are the Brahmacari classes all like that? What is misogyny? Very good question. Misogyny literally means hatred of women, but the meaning of the word has changed or been changed. The language, the English language, is subject to change, sometimes for political or social agendas. Just like, for instance, the word gay, when I was a child, gay meant happy in the sense of being carefree and light-hearted. But now its most common connotation means a homosexual. But being a homosexual doesn't make you automatically happy or carefree or light-hearted. They all seem to be quite bitter, at least the ones who are out there on the social media. Similarly, the word misogyny, hatred of women, plural, was a word which I hadn't even heard of. It was not a much commonly used word because it doesn't seem to be a common phenomenon that people actually hate all women just for being women. It would seem to be an unusual psychological anomaly. But it's now widely used to mean that anyone who doesn't believe that traditional roles, anyone who believes that traditional roles for women should be normative, and that not accepting the radical feminist agenda, that is considered misogyny. If you don't allow women to do whatever they like, whenever they like, however they like, in whatever way they like, it's called misogyny, hatred of women. I first came across the word misogynist when it was used in relationship to myself. I had to look it up. If I look in my heart, I don't see any hatred. It's a very negative tendency. I don't see it, but according to some, because I do advocate more traditional roles, the kind of roles that men and women and children have had for untold generations, pretty much throughout the world, because I advocate that that's, in general, the best way that people should live, then that's considered misogyny. As if today's society, with all its new freedoms, is a better society. For all the changes in society, and then does it make it better? So the society is such a mess today for all these newfound freedoms. Systematic and methodic cherry-picking of the worst shlokas describing female nature. That, according to the questioner, wants to make the point. In the manner of making a question is actually making a statement here, that Brahmacari classes promote misogyny. Well, one major point of having a Brahmacari class is to fix devotees, generally young male devotees, in the understanding that sexual attraction leads to material entanglement. And for the male, usually, normally, the object of sexual attraction is the female. So it's a principle to be understood by transcendentalists, particularly those in this stage of life who are in their youth cultivating spiritual consciousness. It's important for them to know and to understand that attachment to women is the cause of fall down from spiritual life. And there are many verses in the Vedic literature which substantiate this. At the same time, Brahmacari life is not meant for cultivating hatred of anyone or anything. It's meant for elevation of consciousness. One symptom of elevation of consciousness is offering respect to everyone. And particularly within Vedic culture, chaste women are to be respected as goddesses. So it should be a well-rounded understanding, not simply seeing that women are objects of Maya. The Maya is in our minds. And it may also be, and generally is, in the attitude of the woman toward man, the attitude of the man toward woman, the attitude of the woman toward man, as long as we see in terms of material identification, which continues until we're fully liberated, then that attraction is there, and therefore the Vedic culture warns us to be very careful in this regard. And therefore such topics are discussed, presumably, regularly in Brahmacari classes. I don't give many Brahmacari classes, actually. I'm not exactly sure what the discussion is. Maybe you told me this morning you learn different verses once a week, something like that. Anyway, in this regard, I want to read almost all the commentary given by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur on a verse, I didn't get the reference here, a verse in the first chapter of the Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's a very long purport, and it consists of verse after verse, many quotations on this very topic. The kind of discussion that would invite accusations or condemnations of misogyny in persons who do not understand the actual goal of life and the actual purpose of Shastra and of the Acharyas in making such statements. So I'll read them. It's going to be a long reading. It's very heavy, and you may say, well, why am I speaking so much on this topic? Why not on love of Krishna, Well, actually, this topic is introduced or is elaborated upon by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because in that section of of Chaitanya Bhagavat, it stated that the great rishis and munis, which means persons who are highly spiritually elevated and renounced from material attraction, sexual attraction, they praise Balaram's dancing with gopis. So the whole point is to demonstrate that Balaram and Krishna, in their supposedly sexual dealings, are not on the mundane platform. They are on the superlatively spiritual platform. And at the same time, it shows how much emphasis is given on this point in the Vedic teachings, and that we need to know this. So you can call it cherry picking if you like, but this was done by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And if you want to accuse him of misogyny, you can, but if you do, you become an offender to a Maha Bhagavat Paramahamsa Vaishnava Acharya. Anyway, he is quoted as follows from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text 3-4. Shukdev Goswami condemns the association of women, not women, the association of women and those who are attached to women in the following statement to Parikshit Maharaj. O king, the lifetime of such an envious householder is passed at night either in sleeping or in sex indulgence, and in the daytime either in making money or maintaining family members. Nidraya hriyate naktam vyavahayena chavavayam tiva chate heya rajan kutumba bharanena va. Persons devoid of Atma Tattva do not inquire into the problems of life, being too attached to the fallible soldiers, like the body, children, and wife. Although sufficiently experienced, they still do not see their inevitable destruction. So these verses are like they're an introduction to the topic, that if we're bewildered by attachment to women, and remember, scriptures are generally addressed at men, but they're applied to men in relation to women, but for women, the same kind of attraction to men can be considered maya. So this kind of attachment, which leads to entanglement in material existence, it covers our knowledge of Atma Tattva, the reality of our spiritual existence. And then we don't inquire into the problems of life. Quoting from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31, Text 32-42, where Lord Kapiladev says to his mother Devahuti, if therefore the living entity again associates with the path of unrighteousness, influenced by sensually minded people engaged in the pursuit of sexual enjoyment and the gratification of the palate, he again goes to hell as before. These are very serious topics. Just throwing out some word, misogyny. But these are serious topics which we should consider. The person is being described, he becomes devoid of truthfulness, cleanliness, mercy, gravity, spiritual intelligence, shyness, austerity, fame, forgiveness, control of the mind, control of the senses, fortune, and all such opportunities. Therefore, we recommend traditional male-female roles in which there is demarcation, separation, not just free mixing. Otherwise, it's the path to hell. One should not associate with a coarse fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman. Listen to this is very important. The infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to a woman or to the fellowship of men who are fond of women. At the sight of his own daughter, Brahma was bewildered by her charms and shamelessly ran up to her in the form of a stag when she took the form of a hind. Among all kinds of living entities begotten by Brahma, namely men, demigods and animals, none but the sage Narayana is immune to the attraction of Maya in the form of woman. Just try to understand the mighty strength of my Maya in the shape of woman, who by the mere movement of her eyebrows can keep even the greatest conquerors of the world under her grip. One who aspires to reach the culmination of yoga and has realized his self by rendering service unto me should never associate with an attractive woman, for such a woman is declared in the scripture to be the gateway to hell for the advancing devotee. The woman created by the Lord is the representation of Maya, and one who associates with such Maya by accepting services must certainly know that this is the way of death, just like a blind well covered with grass. A living entity who, as a result of attachment to a woman in his previous life, has been endowed with the form of a woman, foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband, as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house, and other material assets. A woman therefore should consider her husband, her house, and her children to be the arrangement of the external energy of the Lord for her death, just as the sweet singing of the hunter is death for the deer. Now, of course, we know in Krishna consciousness that men and women can cooperate in Krishna consciousness, but as long as we're not fully free from material attraction, we should consider the import of these very piercing instructions. Narad Muni speaks the following words to Maharaj Prachina Barhi in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Those who are interested only in a so-called beautiful life, namely remaining as a householder, entangled by sons and a wife and searching after wealth, think that such things are life's ultimate goal. Such people simply wander in different types of bodies throughout this material existence without finding out the ultimate goal of life. Narad Muni describes the story of Puranjan and Puranjani to Maharaj Prachina Barhi in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam from chapter 25 verse 10 to chapter 29 verse 51. Yet he particularly points out the ill effects of associating with women and the benefits of pleasing Lord Hari in verse 28 of the 28th chapter. So in other words, there's a whole bunch of quotes which, for the sake of brevity, we have the quote here. Mitang cha sarang cha vacho hivag mita. Keep it short. Has not been included here. However, sometimes it's good to make it long so that we can keep in our minds just briefly. Now, it doesn't mean that no one should get married. It doesn't mean that all women are just all Maya. It doesn't mean that women can't be Krishna conscious. But there is an important message here, which everyone, male, female, who wants to pursue the ultimate goal of life, should be aware of. Again in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, texts 54 to 55, Narad Muni further explains to Maharaj Prachina Barhi, my dear king, woman who is very attractive in the beginning but in the end very disturbing, is exactly like the flower which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. With woman, the living entity is entangled with lusty desires and he enjoys sex just as one enjoys the aroma of a flower. He thus enjoys a life of sense gratification from his tongue to his genitals, and in this way the living entity considers himself very happy in family life. United with his wife, he always remains absorbed in such thoughts. He feels great pleasure in hearing the talks of his wife and children, which are like the sweet humming of bumblebees that collect honey from flower to flower. He forgets that before him is time, which is taking away his lifespan with the passing of day and night. He does not see the gradual diminishing of his life, nor does he care about the superintendent of death who is trying to kill him from behind. Just try to understand this. You are in a precarious position and are threatened from all sides. My dear king, just try to understand the allegorical position of the deer. Be fully conscious of yourself and give up the pleasure of hearing about promotion to heavenly planets by fruitive activity. Give up household life, which is full of sex as well as stories about such things, and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the mercy of the liberated souls. In this way, please give up your attraction for material existence. In his narration about the householder Vaishnava, King Priyavrata, Sri Shukdev Goswami spoke to Parikshit Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam as follows: He greatly loved his wife Bahishmati, and with the increase of days their exchange of nuptial love also increased. How nice. By her feminine behavior, as she dressed herself, walked, got up, smiled, laughed, and glanced about, Queen Bahishmati increased his energy. Thus, although he was a great soul, he appeared lost in the feminine conduct of his wife. He behaved with her just like an ordinary man, but actually he was a great soul. In the same chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, verse 37, King Priyavrata condemned his life of material enjoyment as follows: Alas, how condemned I have become because of my sense gratification. I have now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I have had enough. I am not going to enjoy any more. Just see how I have become like a dancing monkey in the hands of my wife. Because of this, I am condemned. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, talking about cherry picking, but this is all from the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, Text 2 and Text 7 to 9, Lord Rishabhdev speaks to his sons as follows: It is the verdict of all Shastras and great personalities that by serving a pure devotee, one attains the path of liberation. However, by associating with materialistic people who are attached to material enjoyment and women, one attains the path of darkness. Even though one may be very learned and wise, he is mad if he does not understand that the endeavor for sense gratification is a useless waste of time. Being forgetful of his own interest, he tries to be happy in the material world, centering his interests around his home, which is based on sexual intercourse and which brings him all kinds of material miseries. In this way, one is no better than a foolish animal. The attraction between male and female is the basic principle of material existence. On the basis of this misconception, which ties together the hearts of the male and female, one becomes attracted to his body, home, property, children, relatives, and wealth. In this way, one increases life's illusions and thinks in terms of I and mine. When the strong knot in the heart of a person implicated in material life due to the results of past action is slackened, one turns away from his attachment to home, wife, and children. In this way, one gives up the basic principle of illusion, I and mine, and becomes liberated. Thus one goes to the transcendental world. So here we see not only the negative side, but the positive side. If we can get out of this illusion of identifying with the material world and the entanglement is centered on sexual attraction. If we can get free from that, one can go to the transcendental world. Continuing. After Ajamil was freed from the clutches of the Yamadutas by the mercy of the Vishnu Dutas, he condemned his life of material enjoyment in the following verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 2, text 36 to 38. Because of identifying with the body, one is subjected to desires for sense gratification, and thus one engages in many different types of pious and impious action. This is what constitutes material bondage. Now I shall disentangle myself from my material bondage, which has been caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead's illusory energy in the form of a woman. Being a most fallen soul, I was victimized by the illusory energy and have become like a dancing dog led around by a woman's hand. Now I shall give up all lusty desires and free myself from this illusion. Is it that easy? Now I shall give up all lusty desires and free myself from this illusion. It's not just by saying it. Then Ajamil, he had to do more sadhana to actually be able to become fully eligible for going back to Godhead. But that was his determination. That was his resolve at that point. Ajamil, continuing what Ajamil says, I shall become a merciful, well-wishing friend to all living entities and always absorb myself in Krishna consciousness. Simply because I chanted the holy name of the Lord in the association of devotees, my heart is now becoming purified. Therefore, I shall not fall victim again to the false lures of material sense gratification. Now that I have become fixed in the absolute truth, henceforward I shall not identify myself with the body. I shall give up false conceptions of I and mind and fix my mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 328, Yamaraj says to his servants, Paramahamsas are exalted persons who have no taste for material enjoyment and who drink the honey of the Lord's lotus feet. My dear servants, bring to me for punishment only persons who are averse to the taste of that honey, who do not associate with Paramahamsas, and who are attached to family life and worldly enjoyment, which form the path to hell. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, texts 52 to 53, it is described how Prajapati Daksha and his descendants, who were expert in associating with women and who followed the path of pravriti, or sense enjoyment, were instructed by Lord Hari to continually engage in material enjoyment and follow the non-devotional path of associating with women. So there's the other side. When the king of the Vidyadharas, Chitraketu, saw the lord of the Paramahamsas and foremost of the Avadhutas, Lord Shiva, embracing Parvati, he spoke the following words in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 17, Text 8. Ordinary conditioned souls generally embrace their wives and enjoy their company in solitary places. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 6, Texts 11 to 13 and 17, Prahlad Maharaj instructs his demoniac friends as follows. How can a person who is most affectionate to his family, the core of his heart being always filled with their pictures, give up their association Specifically, a wife is always very kind and sympathetic and always pleases her husband in a solitary place. Who can give up the association of such a dear and affectionate wife? Simply for the satisfaction of two important senses, the genitals and the tongue, one is bound by material conditions. How can one escape? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 9, Text 45, Prahlad Maharaj says to Lord Nrsimhadeva, sex life is compared to the rubbing of two hands to relieve an itch. Grihamedhis, so-called grihastas, who have no spiritual knowledge, think that this itching just happens, that itching at the same time, rubbing two hands. Think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although actually it is a source of distress. The Kripanas, the fools who are just the opposite of Brahmanas, are not satisfied by repeated sensuous enjoyment. Those who are dhira, however, who are sober and who tolerate this itching, are not subjected to the sufferings of fools and rascals. While describing the four ashrams, Sri Narad Muni spoke to Maharaj Yudhishthira the following verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 12, text 6 to 7 and 9 to 11. Fully controlling his senses, he should associate only as much as necessary with women or those controlled by women. A brahmacari, or one who has not accepted the grihastha ashram, family life, must rigidly avoid talking with women or about women, for the senses are so powerful that they may agitate even the mind of a sannyasi, a member of the renounced order of life. Woman is compared to fire, and man is compared to a butter pot. Therefore, a man should avoid associating even with his own daughter in a secluded place. Similarly, he should also avoid association with other women. One should associate with women only for important business and not otherwise. As long as a living entity is not completely self-realized, as long as he is not independent of the misconception of identifying with his body, which is nothing but a reflection of the original body and senses, he cannot be relieved of the conception of duality, which is epitomized by the duality between man and woman. Thus, there is every chance that he will fall down because his intelligence is bewildered. All the rules and regulations apply equally to the householder and the sannyasi, the member of the renounced order of life. The grihastha, however, is given permission by the spiritual master to indulge in sex during the period favorable for procreation. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 14, Text 12 to 13, Narad Muni says to Yudhishthira Maharaj, therefore, if one can give up his attachment to such a wife, he conquers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never conquered by anyone. Through proper deliberation, one should give up attraction to his wife's body, because that body will ultimately be transformed into small insects, stool or ashes. What is the value of this insignificant body? How much greater is the Supreme Being who is all-pervading like the sky? Narad Muni further explains to Yudhishthira Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 15, Text 18. One who is driven by the senses, especially by the tongue and genitals, must accept the position of a household dog to satisfy his senses. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 6, Text 51, Sobhari Muni repents after his extended association with women as follows. A person desiring liberation from material bondage must give up the association of persons interested in sex life and should not employ his senses externally in seeing, hearing, talking, walking, and so on. One should always stay in a secluded place, completely fixing his mind at the lotus feet of the unlimited personality of Godhead, and if one wants any association at all, he should associate with persons similarly engaged. While describing the characteristics of Lord Rama and Sita, Sri Shukdev Goswami says to Parikshit Maharaja in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 11, Text 17, the attraction between man and woman, or male and female, always exists everywhere, making everyone always fearful. Such feelings are present even among the controllers like Brahma and Lord Shiva, and is the cause of fear for them. What to speak of others who are attached to household life in this material world. In Sri Shukdev Goswami's description of the topics of Urvashi and Puruvara to Parikshit Maharaj, Urvashi speaks the following statement in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 14, Text 36 to 38. My dear king, you are a man, a hero. Don't be impatient and give up your life. Be sober and don't allow the senses to overcome you like foxes. Don't let the foxes eat you. In other words, you should not be controlled by your senses. Rather, you should know that the heart of a woman is like that of a fox. There is no use in making friendship with women. Women as a class are merciless and cunning. They cannot tolerate even a slight offense. For their own pleasure they can do anything irreligious, and therefore they do not fear killing even a faithful husband or brother. Women are very easily seduced by men. Therefore polluted women give up the friendship of a man who is their well-wisher and establish false friendship among fools. Indeed, they seek newer and newer friends one after another. See also the 9th canto, 19th chapter, particularly verses 1 to 20 and 24 to 28, where Maharaj Yayati, speaking to Devayani, condemns the association of women with the story of a he-goat and she-goat. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 3, Text 18 to 19, Sri Prabuddha, one of the 9 Yogendras, speaks the following words to Maharaj Nimi, the king of Videha. Accepting the roles of male and female in human society, the conditioned souls unite in sexual relationships. Thus they constantly make material endeavors to eliminate their unhappiness and unlimitedly increase their pleasure. But one should see that they inevitably achieve exactly the opposite result. In other words, their happiness inevitably vanishes, and as they grow older, their material discomfort increases. Wealth is a perpetual source of distress. It is most difficult to acquire, and it is virtual death for the soul. What satisfaction does one actually gain from his wealth? Similarly, how can one gain ultimate or permanent happiness from one's so-called home, children, relatives, and domestic animals, which are all maintained by one's hard-earned money? In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 5, Text 13 and 15, Sri Chamasa instructs King Nimi as follows. Religious sex life is also permitted, but only in marriage for begetting children and not for sensuous exploitation of the body. Unfortunately, however, the less intelligent materialists cannot understand that their duties in life should be performed purely on the spiritual platform. The conditioned souls become completely bound in affection to their own corpse-like material bodies and their relatives and paraphernalia. In such a proud and foolish condition, the conditioned souls envy other living entities, as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who resides in the heart of all living beings. Thus, enviously offending others, the conditioned souls gradually fall down into hell. Lord Krishna's narration to Uddhava on the conversation between Maharaj Yadu and the self-realized mendicant, who tells the story of a pigeon and his wife in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 7, Text 52 to 74, may also be discussed in this regard. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 8, Text 1, Text 7 to 8, Text 13 to 14, and 17 to 18, the mendicant Brahmana further instructs Maharaj Yadu as follows. O king, the embodied living entity automatically experiences unhappiness in heaven or hell. Similarly, happiness will also be experienced even without one seeking it. Therefore, a person of intelligent discrimination does not make any endeavor to obtain such material happiness. One who has failed to control his senses immediately feels attraction upon seeing a woman's form, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, when the woman speaks with enticing words, smiles coquettishly, and moves her body sensuously, his mind is immediately captured, and thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence, just as the moth, maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flames. A foolish person with no intelligent discrimination is immediately aroused at the sight of a lusty woman beautifully decorated with golden ornaments, fine clothing, and other cosmetic features, being eager for sense gratification. Such a fool loses all intelligence and is destroyed, just like the moth who rushes into the blazing fire. A saintly person should never touch a young girl. In fact, he should not even let his foot touch a wooden doll in the shape of a woman. By bodily contact with a woman, he will surely be captured by illusion, just as the elephant is captured by the she-elephant, due to his desire to touch her body. A man possessing intelligent discrimination should not, under any circumstances, try to exploit the beautiful form of a woman for his sense gratification. Just as an elephant trying to enjoy a she-elephant is killed by other bull elephants also enjoying her company, one trying to enjoy a lady's company can at any moment be killed by her other lovers who are stronger than he. A saintly person dwelling in the forest, in the renounced order of life, should never listen to songs or music promoting material enjoyment. Rather, a saintly person should carefully study the example of the deer, who is bewildered by the sweet music of the hunter's horn, and is thus captured and killed. Becoming attracted to the worldly singing, dancing, and musical entertainment of beautiful women, even the great sage Rishyashringa, the son of Mrigi, fell totally under their control, just like a pet animal. Pingala's words of frustration are narrated by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 8, Text 30 to 34, as follows. Just see how greatly illusioned I am. Because I cannot control my mind, just like a fool, I desire lusty pleasure from an insignificant man. I am such a fool that I have given up the service of that person who, being eternally situated within my heart, is actually most dear to me. That most dear one is the Lord of the universe, who is the bestower of real love and happiness, and the source of all prosperity. Although he is in my own heart, I have completely neglected him. Instead, I have ignorantly served insignificant men, who can never satisfy my real desires, and who have simply brought me unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. Oh, how I have uselessly tortured my own soul. I have sold my body to lusty, greedy men who are themselves objects of pity, thus practicing the most abominable profession of a prostitute. I hope to get money and sex pleasure. This material body is like a house in which I, the soul, am living. The bones forming my spine, rib, arms, and legs are like the beams, cross beams, and pillars of the house, and the whole structure, which is full of stool and urine, is covered by skin, hair, and nails. The 9 doors leading into this body are constantly excreting foul substances. Besides me, What woman could be so foolish as to devote herself to this material body, thinking that she might find pleasure and love in this contraption? Certainly in this city of Videha, I alone am completely foolish. I neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who awards us everything, even our original spiritual form, and instead I desired to enjoy sense gratification with many men. Please see verses 35, 39 and 42 in the same chapter. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 9, Text 27, the mendicant Brahmana instructs King Yadu as follows. A man who has many wives is constantly harassed by them. He is responsible for their maintenance, and thus all the ladies constantly pull him in different directions, each struggling for her self-interest. Similarly, the material senses harass the conditioned soul, pulling him in many different directions at once. On one side, the tongue is pulling him to arrange tasty food. Then thirst drags him to get a suitable drink. Simultaneously, the sex organs clamor for satisfaction, and the sense of touch demands soft, sensuous objects. The belly harasses him until it is filled. The ears demand to hear pleasing sounds. The sense of smell hungers for pleasant aromas, and the fickle eyes clamor for pleasing sights. Thus the senses, organs, and limbs, all desiring satisfaction, pull the living entities in many directions. Lord Krishna instructs Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 10, Text 7, Text 25, Text 27 to 28, as follows. One should see one's real self-interest in life in all circumstances, and should therefore remain detached from wife, children, home, land, relatives, friends, wealth, and so on. Accompanied by heavenly women, the enjoyer of the fruits of sacrifice goes on pleasure rides in a wonderful airplane, which is decorated with circles of tinkling bells and which flies wherever he desires. Being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in the heavenly pleasure gardens, he does not consider that he is exhausting the fruits of his piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world. If a human being is engaged in sinful, irreligious activities, either because of bad association or because of his failure to control his senses, then such a person will certainly develop a personality full of material desires. He thus becomes miserly toward others, greedy, and always anxious to exploit the bodies of women. When the mind is so polluted, one becomes violent and aggressive, and without the authority of Vedic injunctions, slaughters innocent animals for sense gratification. Worshipping ghosts and spirits, the bewildered person falls fully into the grip of unauthorized activities and thus goes to hell, where he receives a material body infected by the darkest modes of nature. Lord Krishna tells Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 14, Text 29, being conscious of the eternal self, one should give up association with women and those intimately associated with women. Sitting fearlessly in a solitary place, one should concentrate the mind on me with great attention. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 17, Text 33 and 56, Lord Krishna says to Uddhava, those who are not married, sannyasis, vanaprasthas, and brahmacharis, should never associate with women by glancing, touching, conversing, joking, or sporting. Neither should they ever associate with any living entity engaged in sexual activities, but a householder whose mind is attached to his home and who is thus disturbed by ardent desires to enjoy his money and children, who is lusty after women, who is possessed of a miserly mentality, and who unintelligently thinks, everything is mine and I am everything, is certainly bound in illusion. Lord Krishna gives the following instructions to Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 21, Text 18 to 21. By refraining from a particular sinful or materialistic activity, one becomes free from its bondage. Such renunciation is the basis of religious and auspicious life for human beings and drives away all suffering, illusion and fear. One who accepts material sense objects as desirable certainly becomes attached to them. From such attachment, lust arises, and this lust creates quarrel among men. From quarrel arises intolerable anger followed by the darkness of ignorance. This ignorance quickly overtakes a man's broad intelligence. O saintly Uddhava, a person bereft of real intelligence is considered to have lost everything. Deviated from the actual purpose of his life, he becomes dull, just like a dead person. Lord Krishna further instructs Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Text 26, Text 3. One should never associate with materialists, those dedicated to gratifying their genitals and bellies. By following them, one falls into the deepest pit of darkness, just like a blind man who follows another blind man. In the same chapter, verses 4 through 24, describe the results of association with women attained by Ila's son Priyavrata. Then, having given some quotations from Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur affords quotations from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, beginning with the following. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. Also in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Uttara 7:8, it is stated, alas, how can an intelligent person who has awakened even a little attachment for Krishna enjoy this material body which is full of blood, covered with skin and flesh, and stinks of mucus. And in the 8th wave it is said, alas, I am enthusiastically engaged in relishing varieties of enjoyment in this gross body which is composed of mucus, semen and blood and covered by skin. Oh my God, I'm so wretched that I'm too lazy to remember Krishna, who is the Supersoul and the personification of transcendental bliss. When will I give up affection for this gross body which is full of flesh, blood and pus, and again, expertly engage with love in the service of fanning with chamara, the Supreme Lord Hari, who is beyond the reach of argument and who sits on a golden throne. A devotee of Lord Vishnu who intensely loathes seeing a Padmini woman endowed with all good qualities, considering her bad association, can travel anywhere dancing and remembering the lotus feet of the Lord. As soon as remembrance of associating with women awakens in my mind, my lips curl with disgust. My mind is not satisfied with the activities meant to attain impersonal samadhi, like hearing and remembering, and I have no interest for attaining the mystic perfections because, O my Lord, my mind is extremely attached only to the worship of your lotus feet. There are some quotes selected from Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, cherry-picked, if you like to use that pejorative term, or selected by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, our Acharya. It comprises many quotes in Srimad Bhagavatam, so we should be aware of this. We should realize the fault is in ourselves, not in anyone else. We should cultivate respect toward women, especially chaste, modest women, seeing them all as mother. These points should be inculcated and imbibed in Brahmacari classes and the role of a brahmachari in the contemporary Krishna conscious movement, dwelling in ashrams, meant to to learn and to set a good example of Krishna consciousness to others. Hare Krishna. Any question or comment on this?
Can we say that depends of nature, like
The what of nature? Can we say that
can I say in Croatian? And he will translate.
Okay, say it in Croatian and it'll be translated.
Could we say that according to one's conditioned nature, one who has, for example, more Brahminical qualities, for such a person it is easier to remain a brahmachari than for someone whose nature is more like that of a kshatriya or something else?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, in Brahmana society there are also leaders and administrators, because there are mutts, there's the head of a mutt, and someone has to administer that. So leadership roles, yeah, it may overlap. Brahmana, the role of a Brahmana when he has to lead and organize, within his own circle, he has to see that everything is going on nicely. Just like we have Nanda Maharaj, he's called Nanda Maharaj, he's king of the cowherds. Cowherders are Vaishyas, right? But still he has to act in a leadership role. Someone has to do it among the Vaishyas. But still the Vaishya is not a Kshatriya. A Brahmana who's the head of the mutt, who oversees its administration, he's still a Brahmana. And still his main duty in life is cultivating knowledge of Shastra, teaching knowledge of Shastra. And he's able to be the head of the Brahmanas because he's most adept in that. So leadership is there among not only Kshatriyas, but among Brahmanas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and even lower. Still the Brahmanas, they look for protection to the Kshatriyas in Varnashram society. How should Brahmanas treat Grihastas and vice versa? With mutual respect. That's the underlying principle. Both should act in a respectable manner and mutually respect each other. Actually, Vaishnavas should respect all living beings. At the same time, they should know that their roles are different. And they have their own parameters and modes of activity. It's something like you see the ants. There are three categories of ants, is it? There's the queen ant, the soldier ant, and the worker ant. Is it? We have any entomologists here? So they're by the arrangement of nature, or their karma, they're given a certain body and a certain role and a certain activity. So the worker ant, he works as a worker ant, and is perfect for his body and his mentality. But if he tries to be a soldier ant, it won't work. So in the same way, we have certain bodies and certain mentalities, and the Varnashram system is meant to ascribe to us certain roles suitable to our psychophysical condition. Humans are more complex than ants, mentally more complex. But the same principle holds, that we have certain nature and we should be engaged according to a certain nature. Shrayan svadharmo vegana paradharmo bhayavaha. Therefore Krishna says twice in the Bhagavad Gita that one should engage in the activity suitable for his own psychophysical nature. I'm paraphrasing a bit here. And not try to do another's. It's like if a worker ant tries to do a soldier ant's duty, he may think, well, freedom for the ants, freedom for the workers. But the workers are meant to be workers. So the brahmacharis and the grihastas, that's not a varna role, that's an ashram role, and the brahmachari may be a grihasta, the grihasta may have been a brahmachari, and the grihasta may and should go on to renounce life. But at a certain time, certain period in life, they have a certain role to play. And they should remain within that role. That will be good for them. And if they try to transgress that role, then it becomes a disturbance in society. If a man who's a householder and who's not fit for the renounced life of brahmachari prematurely tries to give up his family, it creates a disturbance in society. If a brahmachari who's not fit for brahmachari life tries to have a kind of enjoying life in the name of brahmachari life, then it's not respectable. But brahmacharis and grihastas, they play their roles very nicely and instruct each other. Respect each other. Yeah, and instruct each other also. That's general guideline. That's the ideal. Srila Prabhupada wanted to establish Varnashram society. It's a huge task. We should try to do it because the order of the Guru is the active principle in spiritual life. Anything else?
Question is what we should do in the West to increase Brahmachari ashram.
What should we do in the West to increase the Brahmachari ashram?
What kind of environment we have to provide?
What kind of environment should we provide? It's a very big topic. Our real aim is not to increase the Brahmachari ashram per se. Our real aim is to spread Krishna consciousness and bring people to Krishna consciousness, and in doing so, naturally the number of brahmacharis should increase. There should be an atmosphere suitable for that, and then persons who are inclined to and suitable for that will be inclined to participate in it. That's a general question, and I gave a general answer. Yeah, but you're looking to increase the number of brahmacharis because to run on our temples, we're looking for brahmachari. That's one thing. And then for full-time book distribution, this and that Bhaktistan Saraswati Thakur, he started his own organization. There was already an organization started by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Navadvip Dham Pracharini Sabha. That was meant, Pracharini meant for preaching. There was already, but it was all householders with the exception of himself and maybe one or two others. But he thought, well, they're householders and they can't dedicate full time. So he wanted to recruit brahmacharis so they can be full-time dedicated and have a very active and powerful mission. So he didn't leave the Navadvip Dham Pracharini Sabha, but he started his... Well, it evolved, so to speak. He was living as a brahmachari, others gathered around him, and then actually the Gauriya Math was actually first of all organized by a householder, and throughout the time of the Gauriya Math, while Bhaktistan Saraswati Thakur was present, the main organizer was a householder, Kunja Bihari Vidyabhushan. Although there were brahmacharis and sannyasis in positions of authority also, but the one who everyone looked up to as the chief organizer was a householder. But it was a movement of, the central core of the movement was brahmacharis and sannyasis, no doubt. In one sense, we don't want to overly stress the difference either, because we're all here to serve Krishna, right? But brahmacharis, they can dedicate full time, which means you can get a lot of things done, which grihastas don't have so much time. Anything else?
Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for these points. Just in case that it was not put in this sentence, what is the most important thing for a brahmachari to kind of have the best training?
Most important thing for a brahmachari. When discussing the role of a brahmachari, in Srimad Bhagavatam we find the introductory statement or the defining statement by Narad Muni. What is that? All you brahmacharis, do you know? Brahmachari gurukule vasandanta gurur hitam dasavan acharan nicho sudrira guru sohritam. A brahmachari should live in the Gurukul. That doesn't mean someone living unmarried at home is a brahmachari. Brahmachari lives in the Gurukul and he tries to control his senses. He lives for the benefit of the Guru. He lives as a slave of his Guru. It could be translated like that. Dasavan achara nicho, in a very menial way. He lives as a servant of his Guru with a strong feeling of friendship or affection for his Guru. So that's the kind of brahmachari which is described by Narad Muni, particularly referring to the kind of brahmachari who lives in the ashram of his Guru in the forest, in which ashrams the Guru often would be a householder, would live there with his wife. So it's somewhat different, the brahmachari ashram we have today, but the sense control, study of scripture, cultivating the Brahminical qualities with a strong sense of submission to the Guru are the qualities of a brahmachari. You can say the basic qualities. And of course for all devotees, Krishna consciousness. But as we're specifically talking about brahmacharis, these are the qualities specifically of a brahmachari. Within the orb or orbit of Krishna consciousness. Anything else?
Okay, so why cannot we put example of Shiva running for Mohini Murti and Kubja being lustful towards Krishna as a high level of devotion?
We don't generally quote these as high levels of devotion, but the very fact that Lord Shiva was chosen to do that shows what a great devotee Lord Shiva is. You get my point? That by this pastime, Krishna in the form of Mohini showed who's the boss, that he can bewilder anyone, even Lord Shiva, showing that Lord Shiva is the highest, because even he's the highest who's below Vishnu, making that point that even he can be bewildered. Generally he's not. He's the husband of the material energy, and he's not physically attracted to her, although by his copulation with her, all the living ahang bija pradapita, he injects all the living beings into the material situation. And the other example was given of Kubja. She's definitely a great soul, but in the gradation she's not on the level of the gopis. She was attracted to Krishna with some kind of material motive which became purified. Krishna and Kubja in one deities are there. Well, it's one pastime of Krishna. One name that one name that Srila Prabhupada gave to one of his disciples was Kubja Kripa Mai Das. The name of Krishna is very merciful to Kubja. The name Kubja, we don't find it actually in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's always given as Trivakra, which means bent in three places. Interestingly. According to Garga Samhita, I believe she was Mantara in a previous life. Mantara, the maidservant who was instrumental in changing Kaikeyi's mind to cause the whole drama of the Ramayana by having Dasharath Maharaj banish Ram to the forest. So a most hated figure, but Krishna was very merciful to her and delivered her. Even such a figure, most despised, Krishna was most merciful to her. If we say the name Kaikeyi, then everyone feels, how disgusting. But Ram himself was never disrespectful to her. And even when others, especially Lakshman, was ranting against Kaikeyi, or Kaikeyi as they say in Hindi, but actually it should be pronounced Kaikeyi. Ram would always restrain Lakshman, say, no, she's our mother. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dante nidhaya churnakang padayo nipatya kritva chakakushatam etadaham bravimi. Hey sadhava sakala eva vihaya durad goranga chandra charane kurutanuraga. Parivadatu jano yatha tata va nanu mukarana vayang vicharayama. Hari rasa madira madati mata bhuvi vilutama nartama nirvishama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.